I'm really excited about this Saw film because we're shooting here in Mexico, and that's completely different. And Mexico, to me, is quite exotic. I think not just for U.S. audiences, but also overseas. And I think, we're also returning back to the original Saw. So we're trying to be respectful to the audience, the public, the fans. And I think they're just going to really enjoy that part of it. I think what's awesome about the traps in this film is the fact that they are interwoven with the story. They're very specific to each character, so I'm not going to say, the trap and the character, but I think they're really well thought out. Additionally, we spent several months testing the traps. We wanted them to be reflective of the original Saw, so you see a lot of oxidized metal. You see components that you believe John Kramer's going to be able to actually construct. And we also, connected the medical aspects of the movie, which are very important. This film has a combination of grittiness and beauty. There's a beauty in Mexico, the landscapes, the architecture, but also there's this intensity of the factory and how that relates to John Kramer's background as an engineer, and I think that that's a great fusion between the two. And I talk a lot with Tobin. We walk through the sets. He says this is, he enjoys the sets, and he says, I would really like this, and we talk about what could be realistic, and there's a lot of reveals. And one of the things that I think is really important to talk about is that our job as a production designer, my job, is that there's an art in horror. I really believe that. So when we're talking about that, we're talking about how much information we give, how much information we hold back, and also what we're going to reveal. That's really important. I think one of the great challenges of this project was really putting together an excellent trap team. But I felt like Tonio Rodriguez was excellent in leading his team. Our team was about 6 to 8 people. We had to fabricate, we had to weld, we had to have painters and prop makers and people that would really be able to test and be knowledgeable in making these mechanisms that were effective and realistic. We were also really, really lucky that we had Hosh, who's in charge of special effects, mechanical effects. And then as it turned out, I think it was a blessing because we weren't really sure what was happening with prosthetics, but as it turned out, Fractured Effects came on board, and they were just phenomenal. So I feel like we have this amazing team, and I think that the fans are going to be happy, all the audience members, all the people that really love Saw. Kevin, coming from an editing background, is this major plus for the show and for Saw because he knows what he needs, he knows what we want to put together. Visually and also just storytelling. I think that's the real key here because we're visual storytellers. Like somebody says, what does a production designer do? I am a visual storyteller. I'm here to help the audience understand the story. We give them colors so that they know that they're in Mexico, colors so that they know that they're in the United States. We enter this layer that is completely different from the rest of the movie. We want this sense of fish out of water when we come into Mexico. And, talking about cast, that was also the other part that we really love because we're telling the story about, who lives in this hacienda, what is this scam? What is this operating theater? When you go into the operating theater, you have to say to yourself, it was so underground, but it's believable, and it's industrial. And so we just want to make sure all of that was true and that the story points were all there for the audience to be able to understand what they're watching. And Kevin, as an editor, was phenomenal in telling us this is what we need, this is what we don't need, which is also quite important too. This is a glass factory that we're shooting at, and it became the underground, operating theater that was attached to the hacienda. So for us, we had to be able to go to a hacienda that actually did have an industrial space, and so we connected both spaces, even though they were far apart. So we had like these plastic entries because we're trying to do a clean room. A clean room is so important for operating theaters. We chose this space because it was big enough for all of us to shoot our scene here, to take over. They sort of gave us carte blanche to be able to build and construct what we needed. It wasn't that far out as far as the location's concerned in the city. We had looked at other factories that were outside of the city. Mexico City is 26 million people roughly, and it's just very difficult to go from point A to point B. So it was really important for us to consolidate all of the locations and the work that we were doing, because we only have X amount of days to shoot, right? So I would say also just the bones were here. I love this factory. It has the bones for us to be able to create this space, to take some of the dressing that's here, to integrate it. We had a lot of really strong sort of hardcore machinery that was here already. They let us oxidize that and make it look as if it was all rusted. So we integrated that. When I think of this film and this experience, I call it Spicy Saw, because it's picante, and it's being shot here in Mexico, and it has just so much more color. I feel certainly previous films have color, but I think this one has a little bit more in some ways, and I think people are really going to enjoy it.